This morning I am in Ithaca, New York, visiting with Femi Cadmus, who is the Edward Cornell Law Librarian and also Associate Dean for Library Services and Professor of Practice at Cornell Law School. Femi, I'm especially pleased to be able to talk to you today because this session will complete, in my opinion, a triple crown achievement for me. You know, your two immediate predecessors are also part of the oral history. Claire, you know, is working in Florida, and Jane, Claire's predecessor, is also living in Florida. So I was able, in the course of a couple of private trips there over the last couple of years, to be able to add them to our oral history.
Wonderful.
So you complete, as I say, the triple crown, in my opinion. But that's not too pompous on my part. Good.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of our custom, Femi, to begin these conversations by learning a little bit about you as a human being, you know, not just an academic law library director type. Could you tell us a little bit about your life, perhaps not only today, but perhaps when you were younger as well?
So, I was born in New York City. I'll say many moons ago. I'm not going to tell you exactly when.
I think there's fair, we leave that out.
Nigerian parents. My father was a student at Columbia University, and my mother worked at the United Nations. So as a young girl, I grew up in New York City. My parents returned to Nigeria. My father took on a faculty appointment at the University of Lagos in Nigeria. And I went to high school, elementary school, high school, and college. I actually completed my law degree, my first law degree, at the University of Jos in Nigeria. What else do you want to know? Do you just want to know?
Well, it's sort of your show. You can say as much or as little.
Okay, I
know.
did that, and I hope I'm not running into any other question you have.
Well, if you do, I just simply edit them out. I don't ask them a second time unless I'm asleep or something.
So it was, I really had a fantastic experience living and growing up in Nigeria and immersing in the culture. It was, I remember those days very fondly. I graduated law school in Nigeria, and shortly after that, I worked briefly. I did work as an attorney. First of all, in the Public Prosecutions Division in a State Ministry of Justice in Nigeria, and also in a commercial practice. I was a solicitor in a commercial practice. And then I went on to England to do an LLM, a Master's in Law, at the University of Warwick in Coventry.
Yeah, that must have been an interesting transformation for you. Now, had you lived in the United States at that point before, where your father was studying, or just in Nigeria before?
So like I said, I was born in New York City. So yes.
Mea culpa.
No, that's okay. So I did, yeah, but I was a little girl when we returned to Nigeria. So I had lived in the United States. And then going back to the University of Warwick, where I did my LLM, I was there for about 2 years. And then returned to the United States. I decided I wanted to return to the United States at that point.
The reason I asked is I would think that the UK is much more like the United States than it is like Nigeria in terms of culture and so on.
Oh yeah, definitely the UK, Nigeria being a former colony of the United Kingdom, the laws are similar. Yeah, definitely more similar than the United States.
So you have your basic law degree from the University of Nigeria, and then
the University of Jos in Nigeria was where I got my LLB, as it's called, and then I went to the Nigerian Law School, where you get a certification. So it's not a second degree per se. It's more like getting admitted to the bar. But the difference in Nigeria is that you spend a year getting that practical experience at the Nigerian Law School, and I got the BL, which is the.
Do you go through a separate baccalaureate program before that, or do you sort of just go through school beyond what we would call high school and you get the LLB?
So you go through high school, you go through an advanced level secondary education,
Mhm.
and then your LLB is actually your first degree. It's
Yeah.
a bachelor's degree, but that is how it's done in the Commonwealth, and Nigeria is part of the
I know that's the norm in the UK.
It's the norm in the
Because
UK.
I had a couple of faculty colleagues over the years who were graduates of that, and they often would have a master's of some sort from,
Yes.
say, Harvard or
Yes.
one of the places.
You graduate law school pretty young,
Yeah.
because it's your
Well,
first degree.
then they joined the faculty, and we had one, and I won't name her, but she was 22 years old.
Yes.
And, younger than many of the students she
Yes.
was teaching, and we all had the occasion to have older students, but not the entire class virtually.
Sounds familiar, yes.
Yes. Well, you have actually 4 degrees.
So it's 3. So
3.
that
So the
degree from
certificate
the
is-
certification from the getting admitted to the Nigerian bar is the
Mhm.
barrister at law, the BL, is not a degree. It's like a
Okay.
3.
Yeah, so I misinterpreted what I
Oh,
looked
that's
at.
fine.
Yeah,
That's
well,
okay.
It's the trouble when you have a rank amateur doing these scripts, you see. Well, maybe not, but on that one I was.
It's a different system, so you wouldn't know.
Yeah,
It's a
well,
different system.
I should maybe, but I don't.
Now you do.
With sort of that said, there is a follow-up question I usually ask about the person, and that is, do you have any particular hobbies or passions or special interests that you occupy your time with outside of work? Of course, I say that in case your dean watches this.
So Pat, like you, we were talking about this before we started this. I like to travel.
Mhm.
It's just that unfortunately I can't travel as much as you do because I'm not retired yet. So I think I've been to many continents. I'm saving the best for the last. I haven't been to Australia yet,
Ah.
and I haven't been to Antarctica, and where haven't I been? There's one other continent. So I'm saving the best of the last, but I do like to travel. And I also love to work with young children. I haven't been doing as much as I used to before, but I was a Sunday school pre-K teacher for many years, and it's just a delight to teach children and to learn from them. They're just wonderful creatures, very unfiltered, innocent, and just a great dynamic when you're working with children. I want to do more of that.
Sounds like it would be an interesting way of passing a little time,
Yes.
especially on a weekend or Sunday.
On a
Yeah.
Sunday, yes.
They're probably challenging in the questions they ask.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because they're probably pretty intelligent.
Out of the mouth of babes is what I say.
Absolutely. Well, I noticed in looking at, in preparation for today, that you actually have another degree, which you haven't mentioned so far, and that was a library science degree from the University of Oklahoma, as I recall.
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about when you got that and what the motivation for it was?
Okay, so I completed my LLM in England and decided to return to the United States. I think I mentioned that. And I got a warm invitation from my cousin, who was at that time on the faculty in the Department of Economics at the University of Oklahoma. So I landed in Oklahoma, and with my foreign credentials, my law degrees, I had very limited prospects. At that time, I had not sat for the New York bar. I eventually sat for the New York bar and got licensed in New York. But then I just had these foreign degrees, foreign legal experience, and very limited prospects. I was job hunting and stumbled on an ad for a law research assistant at the University of Oklahoma Law School, and I thought, ooh, that sounds interesting. That piqued my interest, so I applied for it. And I interviewed with Maria Prodi, who was the interim law library director at that time at the University of Oklahoma. It just sounded interesting. You would be assisting faculty and students with research and other kinds of duties and tasks in the library. I hadn't worked in a library before, but the research part was very appealing to me. And I jokingly say that she definitely took a risk because she extended an offer to me. She took a risk with this person who had no exposure whatsoever to American jurisprudence, and placing this person virtually at the reference desk from day one, assisting pro se patrons and faculty and students. But I loved it. I loved it so much that I didn't give it a second thought. I wanted to go to library school. And fortunately for me, the University of Oklahoma Library School was right there in Norman.
Most convenient.
Very convenient. So I think it really was serendipity. If anybody
Uh-huh.
said I would be a librarian, I'd say, oh no, you got to be kidding me. But I got immersed in the whole thing. I loved working with the card catalog. This is back in the day. I loved loosely filing. I can still loosely file like.
You know, many of
I'm an
our,
expert.
our current younger colleagues have probably no inkling of any of those. I mean, maybe card catalogs, I've seen some pictures.
Yes.
Loose leaf services,
Yes,
what's that?
Yes, yes. So it was, that's how I landed in library school and got my library science degree.
Well, you know, I'm not surprised, given your family background and interests and your own academic achievements prior to that, that you somehow have ended up in the academy, so to speak, in this country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're not the first librarian from Nigeria or other places. I mean, our niche of the profession includes a lot of people who have come at different points. When I was first in the profession, there were a number of retirements going on, which was delightful for those of us new. But there were people, many of them were European legal scholars, who had come here either before the Nazis got too much power or after the war, World War II was over. And in those days, being licensed to practice law here was usually required U.S. citizenship. And also there was the usual cultural and language difficulties, and especially the practice as it existed pretty much in those days. So they would, you know, gravitate to academic appointments. And law librarians became one of the places many of them ended up, and they, you know, they could do their work, their legal scholarship, and all of that.
I'm sure it made the profession much richer, just to have that kind of diversity.
Yeah, and so you sort of are following the footsteps of some of the giants in our field in this sense. Yeah. So you were at the University of Oklahoma, you decided to get the library degree, you were working at the law school. That's still a step away from deciding that you're going to be a law librarian in a strict sense, I think. So could you tell us a little bit about the process by which you decided that that was the exact focus?
Well, I think, again, just by working in a library, it amazed me when I was in library school. I had colleagues in my class who had never worked in a library, and I would ask them, how are you sure you're going to enjoy this? You've not worked in a library. You think you're going to like this, but how do you know? They've not done internships, they've not worked in a library. It was all very much a hypothetical exposure to librarianship. I had worked in a library. I just, something about the profession just attracted me. I just felt very much at home with research, very much at home with patrons, very much at home with the service orientation. I did not like when I was a lawyer, the part of it I didn't like was the adversarial nature of working as a lawyer. It just did not sit well with me. So this, I felt like I was at home. I knew I wanted to do this. And when I graduated, I always joke that if you're in a place like OU, the University of Oklahoma, you'd have to wait for a librarian to retire or die, or both, before you got a position. So I knew I had to start looking outside of Oklahoma. I loved it in Norman, Oklahoma. I was married at this time, and I had 2 small children, and it was the perfect town to raise a family, but it was time to look outside of Norman to get a permanent full-time professional position. And that's when I got hired at George Mason University in Arlington, Virginia.
That's a bit of a change from the plains of Oklahoma.
It was a crazy change. We were
The weather too out in Oklahoma, at least in the spring, can be a little scary on occasion, although they do get those even in Maryland and Virginia.
They do.
Especially more recently.
That's
I think
true.
it's a phenomenon of the global warming situation. I have a couple of follow-up quick questions. One is, did anyone specifically play a role in helping you to decide to become a law librarian, or did it just sort of happen on your own?
You know, there were influences from people I worked with. I do say my predominant influence in life, I'm a Christian and I pray. I really felt that God was calling me into this profession, and I didn't want to invest my time, my energy, my money looking into another profession that would not bring me joy, or I would not bring other people joy in. So after a lot of prayer, I decided this is what I wanted to do. And again, I had the influences of people that I worked with when I was at the University of Oklahoma. The interim law library director at that time, Maria Prodi, was excellent. She gave me my first start, and worked with other library directors there, Scott Pagel and Nick Singleton were directors.
Leaders in the field.
Yeah, so
in their time.
I wanted to do it. I just knew it. I had come home. I had been a lawyer and didn't like it, and I thought, well, what next? And this was the next step. It just felt it was logical. It was just a natural trajectory and transition.
Would you count any of these, or maybe other colleagues, as mentors to you as you got launched as a law librarian?
I will say that all the law library directors I worked with and for are mentors in one shape or the other, and I worked for many of them. Not because I worked in many libraries, but I worked in libraries that had turnover. So Phil Berwick hired me, and he was great. And his style of mentorship was do it yourself. He would give you a space to develop your own ideas and use your initiative. He was a very hands-off director, and that was very helpful for me, even though I was starting off in the field, but it gave me the opportunity to explore. I worked with Steve Hinckley, who had just come over from Richmond to George Mason at that point in time, and he was the one who allowed me to actually carve out the next step. I started off as assistant law librarian for circulation and reference services, and soon got to a point where I needed another challenge. And he's the one who said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, this place doesn't have a collection development librarian. It was in technical services, but it wasn't really carved out as a niche of itself, and it was suffering. So I wanted to do it, and he said, "Go ahead." So he mentored me in that role. Before I left George Mason, Deborah Keene, who's still currently
She's
there,
still, yes.
was wonderful in that she is a very detail-oriented, very strategic person, and very tactical too. So she taught me how to pay attention to detail, which I didn't have a natural propensity for, but she was the one who always wanted things done right. And so she mentored me in that way. I left George Mason and went to Yale and worked for Blair Kaufman, who's always got like 1 million ideas running in his head at the same time. And he just taught me how to think creatively and innovatively and just to do things, and explore. So I count all these people as mentors in the sense that they developed talents inside of me that I didn't even know were there. And I still consult with a couple of them until today.
Well, Blair is somebody I've known since he was a student, actually, in Seattle at the University of Washington Library School, and throughout his career. And, he just, as you know, being a immediate past member of the executive board, he term just ended a few weeks ago, literally, this last summer.
Yes.
Blair got the Marion Gould Gallagher Distinguished Service Award. And,
he's a very inspirational person, I'll say that.
Well, I'm going to have the pleasure, let's see, it's, trying to think, about a little less than a week from now, to actually see Blair.
Oh, wow.
He's retired.
Yes, I know
and
that.
they've moved to
beautiful Maine.
And I'm going to be up there visiting.
Well, say hello to
the plan currently is that he and I will do one of these conversations for the oral history, because we'd love to have him part of it as well as you and others that have been part of this. So you were at Yale for a while. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience? That's a pretty, shall we say, sophisticated library in terms of the sort of range of things they're doing.
Yeah, Yale was an exciting time. I was at Yale for just over 3 years.
Mhm.
One person I didn't mention, and I'd like to really mention, is Morris Cohen. So when I was at Yale, he was still there as emeritus faculty,
yeah.
and was just a wonderful person in checking in on me. I say this that Yale's not the most diverse of environments, and so coming into Yale, wonderful, wonderful collegiality and welcoming and warm staff. I appreciated the fact that Morris would stop in, give me his books, would check on me, send emails. He was just a wonderful person, so that's one person I really need to mention. But again, what I said about Yale is completely true. Very inspirational environment, a place where innovation was real and was normal, so that you were expected to do things differently and to be creative, and you were not punished for failing. So if you tried something and it didn't work, you still learned something through the process.
Sure.
And that really built another dimension into my perspective as a librarian, because as librarians we tend to be very traditional, and we tend to stick with what works. And we tend not to always want to push the boundaries, but then I got into this environment where I could do that. It was just like a lab, they talk about innovation labs today. I mean, that was my innovation lab, where I could experiment with different ways of administration and approaches and budgeting. It was just, it was a wonderful experience, and I cherish that experience.
Well, I have to hand it to our colleague Blair Kaufman for encouraging people that are working there to basically feel empowered to do this. That, I think, is the mark of a truly gifted leader.
It's true.
Whatever role the leader formally has.
Yes.
In his case, it was law librarian or director or whatever the term they use currently up there is.
Law librarian.
Yeah. And Morris, of course, to have him around. I mean, talk about somebody of huge stature in our field, and in a different way than many of us.
Yes.
Morris was a real scholar.
Yes.
More of the order of the director there, or librarian there, back in about the 1930s, Fred Hicks. And many of his contemporary law librarians were more of the scholars than the people that sort of made everything happen and coped with all the changes that we've faced in our field in the last few decades, especially the last decade or so, from what I'm told.
It's been a doozy, yes.
Yeah. So you had a chance to sort of do a little, I call it experimenting and this and that, trying things. What were your more specific duties at Yale? You must have had some sort of a
so my
portfolio that was on your lap.
And that was interesting too, that I was given like free reign. It was just like, I was the associate law librarian for administration, so I was the administrative librarian, working very closely with the librarian and managing the library in his absence. So the duties that come with that, running a library, I think back then there were probably closer to 50 members of staff at Yale. So it was a big enterprise, and unionized also, so it had a unionized staff. So it was very nuanced in the way that you had to manage it, and sometimes very delicate. And I arrived actually in 2008, just before the economic crash. I interviewed before and was told, wow, this is the land of milk and honey. You're not going to have to worry about money and budgets forever. And
The milk and the honey all went
it went
someplace.
in about 2-3 months. I was like up there just before school started, and by fall it was okay, budget cuts and layoffs, which was unheard of at Yale back then. So it required really innovatively thinking about how to continue to provide the kinds of services that Yale was known for. With
I remember Yale has long been known for the breadth of its collection, and I don't mean just law from the United States and a whole range of other countries, but also the interdisciplinary approach of many of the faculty have, and that's reflected in the breadth of the collection in terms of subjects. You would find treatises and other books and articles
Yes.
on a variety of academic disciplines that you would normally have thought you'd walk across the street to the
Streets, you get
Sterling
those things.
Memorial
Yes.
Library, Yale, their university library you
Yeah,
got.
yeah.
But they were provided in
It has
the
an
law school
amazing-
library as well.
Yes, an amazing, amazing collection.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was what I was, just running the library, day-to-day operations and
Uh-huh.
planning strategically for the library. That was my,
Must have been quite a challenge.
it was. but-
Especially in our colleague Frank Hodak describes the last few years since that Great
Yes.
Recession, as the news people often call it, as shall we say, varying trying times.
Yes.
Very challenging, I think that's actually the word he used.
Challenging. It just makes you, I think what it has done is it's made us as librarians challenge the status quo and rethink the way that we approach services and our collections.
Mhm.
And I think it was a good thing. Sometimes you need a little bit of a shake-up
Mhm.
to recalibrate and be more responsive to your
I think
users.
you're probably right,
Yeah.
Femi, yeah. Well, speaking of a shake-up and recalibrating, you're now here at Cornell.
I'm at Cornell. Woohoo!
And
In
you're
Ithaca,
the-
New York.
You're the top person in this law library, at least in the so-called organization chart. Maybe
So-called.
you're not in all the other senses. We all know who really runs these places. But you want to talk a little bit about how that
Cornell.
all came about and a little bit about your experiences here. You haven't been here a really long time.
I've
But
been here 5 years now, so
Yeah,
I just
well,
celebrated my
that's-
5th anniversary.
I keep talking to people who put in 25 and 30 years. So
I'm still a baby at Cornell. This is
Yeah.
the place where there are lots of legacy staff, and so you say 5 years, I'm like, oh, you just got here yesterday. So I've been here. Cornell was an opportunity that I thought I didn't want to pass up. I am the 7th librarian here at Cornell,
Mhm.
and if you count the student librarian, I'll be the 8th, but if you count the professional librarians, I'm the 7th.
Okay.
And so when Claire resigned, or retired actually, it's not resigned, she retired,
Okay.
and was on her way to Florida, I knew that this was a position that didn't come up very often.
Mhm.
And it was a chance that I didn't want to pass up. And so I applied, and I got the offer, and that was very exciting. And came here, and it's been a very interesting experience. It's been a wonderful one, but it's been an experience that has actually stretched me in different directions. We're one of the very few non-autonomous law libraries. We're part of a central library system.
Mhm.
I've never worked in an environment like that before. And so when I say it stretched me, it really did, because I just did not have that paradigm. I was used to working in autonomous law libraries. So the experience has been very interesting, challenging at times, but I think it's very invigorating. It actually makes for never a dull moment around here because it's just a very different dynamic that I had to understand, appreciate, and work with. Yeah, I have 2 bosses, so I report to the law school dean
Yeah.
and the university librarian.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I call it a delicate dance, but you
Yeah,
can do
let's,
it.
let's hope they are not diabolically opposed on some issue and you're in the middle.
I'll be toasting if that were the case. Yeah.
Well, you never know. Well, with your background and experience, I'm sure you could pick up a job someplace, somewhere if you had to. Maybe not quite as interesting a job, unfortunately, so keep them happy. Well, tell a little bit about, have you done any, you must have, the last few years, 5 years, with what's been going on in our profession, both in terms of more trying times with budgets, but also the innovative products, the digital products that are coming out. You must have, be able to at least make some changes in the composition of how you build the collection and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had to do that when I got here. So we had a collection that was heavily print, and which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what was going on was we did not have enough resources or funds to really buy the things that our faculty and our students needed.
Mhm.
We were heavily into the National Reporter System, which I discontinued in print. We
I
had,
see that all over.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Westlaw.
Yeah.
And
So
if
we
that
had-
isn't good enough, you have other sources like Lexis.
So it's been a transitory period. It's a time where, as librarians, we've had to be more innovative and more embedded in the scholarly enterprise. And when I say that, we're doing things here at Cornell. We started a legal research clinic run by the library, and it takes research out of the hypothetical into the real life. We have clients in the community. It's run by one of the librarians who's licensed to practice in the state of New York.
Uh-huh.
We are developing for the spring a legislation clinic, and we'll have a client, the New York Law Revision Commission. So we're doing things that librarians typically don't do. Librarians typically don't run clinics. I know there are a few, one or two
Yeah.
across the country.
I know a lot of them are involved much more extensively in teaching, and not
Teaching.
just the head librarian, but many of the others,
Yes.
if not all of them.
All,
This is
yes.
a little slight different focus of the teaching part.
Definitely. So we have 9 librarians, including myself, with JD MLSs, and we all teach. So we teach the gamut from administrative law. I teach law practice technology, foreign and international law, IP law research. We have a couple of, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 courses, and then we participate in lawyering too. So we teach the research component of lawyering. So it's very different from when I started off in libraries, where maybe the director taught. But now it's a participatory process where we're, again, engaged in the scholarly enterprise of the law school and more embedded.
We began to do more of that while I was still the active director before I retired. But my successor, Billy Joe Kaufman, is just taken it much farther and from going around visiting colleagues, doing these conversations and other things I get excuses to visit. It's fascinating to hear how the role has evolved into much more of a hands-on, direct contact with the students in a teaching role. Than we always said, well, we taught, but it was a different type of teaching.
It was different, I can tell you that, because this is my 26th year in library, so yes, it was different from the early 90s. So.
Now, did you make some of the innovations here, or were they already doing some of the same stuff?
No. So the clinics, for example, the experiential learning, and the ABA standards have evolved also. That happened post me getting here.
Okay.
So some of that, those developments are pretty recent, the past 4 or 5 years. So, yes. It's been exciting. It takes a lot more in terms of what librarians are doing, and some librarians can do it and some can't.
Well, I suppose
You know,
any
so.
major evolution in any profession, there are some people that just do not adjust to
They
it.
don't,
So
and
they
they retire.
find other
Yes,
things,
so they-
retirement
yeah.
or, I remember when the first computers came in, I had a very senior colleague from another school who will not be mentioned by name for obvious reasons. Very highly regarded and for good reason. And that person told me that given these new computers, it was time
to go.
retire, and she did. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's,
probably had a great life for a while after that as a retiree.
Yeah.
But
And so we've been engaged in digitization efforts also. We're taking historical materials and making them available, open access. So that's something that we're really doing a whole lot of, and identifying those kinds of materials that are unique.
I know Cornell was one of the places that the William Hine Company was working with, and what started off is to sort of digitalize the legal periodicals, and now is sort of, the way I look at it, digitalizing anything that is available that is of use.
So use that is unique. So we've worked with William Hine, and we've collaborated with them, and they're not too far from us. They're just
No, I was up there yesterday.
Yes.
I got a chance to talk with Bill and several of his colleagues in a couple of sessions for this history. And also, we all went to the game with the Buffalo Bills New York Jets last night and watched the poor old Bills lose.
Oh, no.
And a heartbreaker. We were so close, but so far
Yeah.
at the end. But it was a interesting, fun evening. They do this on all the game days, and I won't clip this. They might have they get it for the High Online, but this is a tradition. I asked Shannon, Bill's son, if this has been something. He said, "Oh, it was always on. Every time I knew anything about the company, it was going to the games and tailgating and having a grand time. All of them sorted together. It was just something they all did.
It
And they
sounds
still
like
do.
fun. It sounds
So
like,
I got to be a part of it
yeah, it
last
sounds like
night.
tons of fun. Yes.
Yeah, it was. Sort of a late evening, but
Probably cool too. We're getting cool.
Well, they
temperatures
kept
here.
warning me. I did
Yeah.
bring
Oh,
a
you did
medium
not.
weight
Okay,
jacket,
yeah, it's
and
gonna be-
I was quite comfortable.
You were
and-
okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if this had been maybe December, it would have been a little different.
No way.
Well, they do play ball there in December, at least from what they tell me, at least till the
I
playoffs
don't know how they do it.
start.
I guess you just get used to the weather. That's what happens.
Yeah, well, you do, and everybody sort of accommodates to whatever they have to. Well, in addition to your day job and other day jobs, you have taken the time to be involved in professional service to our profession, and I've already mentioned that you just completed a term through your term as a member of the executive board of ELL. But I also noticed in your background that you have been involved before that as chair of the economic status of Law Librarians Committee, that was a special committee, I imagine.
It was actually a standing committee.
It was?
Yes.
Okay, that shows my
That's okay.
ignorance, having been retired for a few years. But I would think it would be a very important one,
Very important.
especially given the circumstances of the current era as to budgets and so on.
Yes.
Have you want to talk a little about some of the service, perhaps why you engage in it, and maybe, I've just mentioned a couple of things. Maybe there are some other things you would like to bring up.
So WWL, to me, engaging with the association was just, it was not anything I questioned. I wanted to do it. I wanted to be a part of the association. I wanted to network with others, and I have found so many colleagues that I otherwise would not have stumbled upon if I were not part of WWL. So it's been a staple for me since I was at George Mason. That was when I joined, and I actually got my, what was it now, what would that be? My 20th anniversary pin. I got it this year because I joined in 1996 officially. Serving has been just great. It has just been wonderful to be a member of the board of WWL. I've had the opportunity, just by virtue of being a member and doing chapter visits, and just that exposure, meeting so many of our members and understanding what their needs are, understanding what their expectations are for the profession and the association. I couldn't have had that kind of exposure had I not been on the board. So it's really been a terrific experience. I was part of the Strategic Directions Committee, which is a subcommittee of the board, developing strategic directions for the next couple of years. And what an experience. We came up with knowledge, community, and leadership. And in essence, what we're saying is WWL needs to take on that mantle of leadership in the legal information industry. We need to be seen as the experts. We can only do this with community. We can only do it with our members. If you're talking about innovation and collaborating with others in the legal information industry, the only way we can do it is from the grassroots, from our members. And this has just been a very special experience. Just building these connections with membership and learning again about what people really expect from the association. I know you're aware of the branding effort that took place. That was seismic, I think. It was.
Well, it was an interesting split of members. I happened to, and I told Keith Ann, the last year's president, that I thought it was probably time to think along those lines, because so much of what we do has changed.
changed.
And this is particularly true in the law firm sector.
That's true. More so.
Yeah, much,
Yeah.
much more. I
Yeah.
mean, their roles are, you know,
It's more
have a
focused,
huge difference from
Yes.
just a decade or two back. And if ALL doesn't reach out to the whole community, including some of the new kinds of professionals that are starting to show up, somebody else will,
Yeah.
some other group may poach all our members away because they'll offer something that
Yeah.
ALL needs
Yeah,
to
hopefully
offer.
not.
I know you on the board worked very hard on.
Yeah, we did, and I think we learned a
Yeah.
lot. I personally, I would not speak for other members of the board, I can't do that, but I think what I learned is that we have a real engaged membership. We had, in terms of the vote, we had the highest vote ever in the history of WAWL over this issue, so we really have engaged members. And we have members who are seeking and yearning for more input in what we decide. The direction the association will take. So it was a very useful exercise in just having this peek into the minds of our members and hearing from them. So all in all, I think that the experience itself was well worth it. It got a little bit rancorous sometimes, and emotional, emotions were heightened, but I think it was, at the end of the day, it was a very useful experience. I came away understanding a lot of what our members seek and need for in the association.
You know, it's interesting. There's a retired ALL list of retired members.
I joined that list.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be retired to join it. So
Well,
I did.
you don't,
I
as
joined
you and I
it.
both know. But we had the discussions too.
Is this a new list you're talking about, or is this because there's a
No,
new
oh, you're
one?
thinking of the caucus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brand new.
Oh,
No,
yes.
this is actually a list that's been around
Oh.
about a little over a decade.
Oh, this is a secret list. Okay.
It's not secret. It's up there. It's one of the ALL lists. And you don't have to be a member to be a current member to be on the list. Unlike the caucus, which
I
I think
didn't
does
realize
require
that. Yeah.
membership
Okay.
in the association. The list doesn't make policy. The
Mm.
caucus may have some role in helping you, the board, do that. But we did have a discussion of the rebranding and the array of comments. One, we're all civil, which may have not been the same in all event sources you all had access to, but they were very strongly held,
Yes.
and they were diverse.
Yes.
Some were very much for
And some-
rethinking the name, others very much, we are librarians and we
Yeah,
need
that's
to remain librarians in that sense.
Yes.
It was interesting and well-reasoned discussion.
It was, and
I
it was-
learned a lot just from my colleagues.
It was really it was an eye-opener, that's what
Yeah.
I call it.
Well, I imagine you were having colleagues from a much broader array of members than I
Yes.
was reading from.
It was a
So
broad
it must have
spectrum.
been very interesting,
It was very,
but challenging.
but it was good. Again, it was a great experience.
Well, if you don't have something to, liven things up, being on the board would be boring.
Yes,
wouldn't
that's
it?
true. We don't want to be board members.
The board member,
Someone gave me
exactly.
one of those stickers you put on badges, and it said BORED member. I'm like, no, I don't want to be that one. I want to be.
Well, I don't think you were. And nobody on the board was bored
No,
in
no,
those
no,
last
not that.
couple of years.
No.
Good. Well, now you are not just into teaching and running the library or whatever the director type person is supposed to do with the
Yes.
library, but you also have done some writing. And
Yes.
you aspire to do more, I think, is what you.
It's becoming more and
said.
more challenging with my administrative task and
You mean your day job?
my day job is taking so much more time, and teaching also, but I do like writing, and I like to, I wouldn't call myself a scholarly writer, in the sense that I do want to write things that people will find useful, and that appeals to a broad spectrum and wide readership. So I would not call myself a scholarly writer, but I do write.
So you're not Morris Cohn the second,
No.
or
I'm
Fred
Femi-
Hicks, or
No. I'm Femi
Art
Cadmus.
Beardsley, or
No,
anybody, the
no.
old timers back in the 20s and 30s that were really scholars
Yes.
in more of a sense than
Yeah.
many of us today have been able to be.
Yeah. So I do, I enjoy. I think it serves a purpose in the sense that if people find what I'm writing helpful, and these days we have access to technology that reveals who's reading what we're writing, where it's been downloaded from. So I get my download counts, I get the places all over the world where people are downloading the information, the articles that I have written that are appealing, and the ones that are not so appealing. So it gives me a sense of
more information than you may have wanted.
it gives you a sense of where you should be, spending your time and diverting your energies and what people find useful. I think it's important that if a library director has the time, and I recognize that not all my colleagues do. We have colleagues who are running operations with very lean staff and not enough time to do that. But if it's something that you have the time in the day to, you're sharing your knowledge and your expertise, and you're preserving it for posterity, and that's always very useful.
Well, as you say, you've been part of this profession for over a quarter of a century,
Sounds-
and in a variety of places,
Yes.
in a variety of eras, literally, for law librarians. I mean, when you got started, it was books
Pre-internet.
and
That
no
was-
internet, very little digital,
Yeah.
some microfilms or
Yes,
microforms, and now it's just a whole new world. And
It's
some of your interests, I know in writing, have been to sort of talk about the changing role
The
of
changing role,
the profession
evolving
and
role.
those of us part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, so it must be very challenging and interesting
It
as
is
well.
interesting. It is
Yeah.
interesting. Never a dull moment.
Well, Femi, we're nearing probably the end of our today's conversation, but before we do, it's the custom to ask if there's anything we've not talked about that you would like to bring up.
When's your oral history? Have you had one done?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I
So
got
it's up
done.
on the
It's on the thing,
Hind
yeah.
website.
Yeah, it's
and,
one of the early ones.
So who?
Michelle Wu
Oh, from Georgetown.
conducted it,
Okay.
actually in her office.
Oh.
It's a little clunky here and there because we've learned different techniques. I mean, we didn't have
So you have to
these
do it. You have
of
to
a facility like you and I are in this morning here at
a
Cornell.
redo with Michelle. Maybe.
Well, I don't know. She would tolerate a whole redo. But it was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I tell the story how I got recruited into the field in
Mm.
some detail, and drop the names of the people who influenced me, just like I asked.
Okay.
And it was fun going down memory lane. I don't know if anyone watches it, but I could get that feedback, but I've never asked for it.
Yeah. I will definitely watch it.
Yeah, well, it's a fun thing, yeah. I'll give you a little preview. I was a tad bit younger than most of our colleagues when I got introduced to this field. I was a 15-year-old boy.
Oh, wow.
And Marion Gallagher was out in Seattle. I grew up there. And our next door neighbor was the dean of the law school. And he got me and three of his son's friends who were all 16-ish. I was a bit younger. He helped for a week throwing out books before we went back to our high school classes, because Marion had some books in a stack that needed to go to the dumpster, literally. And when they finished the week and put in the payroll documents, it turned out that I was illegal because I was only 15.
Oh, no.
So it was not the most propitious start in this career, but it did work well from then on. And
that's interesting.
I'll leave the rest to what I said on camera.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, perhaps, is there anything else you want to mention? Or
Unless you have any questions for me. Do you have any other
have
questions for me?
been a whole bunch of them, but you've
Okay.
been answering them as we've gone along.
Good,
So I
good.
really don't
Okay.
have any others.
Um,
As people that watch very many of these know, we do use a script in the questions, but it's a flexible script. And so when you basically explain something that I was going to ask later
It's
on
already
as a
covered,
question,
yes.
if I'm awake, which I'd better be doing these, or I'll look like a complete failure as doing these. I don't ask it again. And so you've really gone right around the whole gamut of things I wanted to talk about.
That's great. I'm glad that it's worked out.
Well, let me, on that basis, thank you, Femi Cadmus, for appearing today before our camera and engaging in this discussion, this conversation with me, which will make a very good addition, in my opinion, to the repertoire of, that we call the individual histories that comprise the oral history of law librarianship for Hein Online. And in thanking you, I'm doing so not just on my own behalf, I'm the one that gets to be here and participate, which is the real fun part, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Odek, and of course Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have the privilege and honor of putting together, working to put together this oral history. So I want to thank you on all of their behalves as well as my own for today.
I thank you so much, Pat, for making that trip from Buffalo early this morning, so I appreciate you being here. Yeah,
Well,
too.
I think I've already alluded on camera that we didn't go to the Bills game last night and didn't get out of there until close to midnight.
Yes.
So,
It's amazing you're awake, actually.
oh, I don't know, I think Bill Hine was sat next to me in the stadium, and he said, "How are you going to handle tomorrow, you know, with the sleep
You
you're
handled
gonna
it
get?"
very well.
Well, I said I'll be at pure adrenaline. And then I leaned over and said, sometimes I like to pretend I'm still 25 years old instead of, shall we say, a tad older.
Older, yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.